Yeah.
Welcome back to another Fantasy Football Predictive Analytics podcast. I will be joined with Hribar. Rich, how's it going?
Rhys, what's going on, brother? We're flying solo, you and I tonight. How is everything going this season? How is the 2021 football season treating you right now?
It's treating me pretty good. Not too many. The Henry injury hurt me real bad in one league.
Oh, no.
But I have a good enough team. I think I'll make it through. How's it been treating you?
Everything's good so far. I mean, outside of the dynasty teams that are planned to be bad, everything else is hanging in. We're hanging on. We're making the most of this season. It's been a unique fantasy season with just really kind of, it's been just Cooper Kupp as the kind of anchor. And then we've had a lot of just pockets of production from players. So it's been highly variant, I think, for a lot of people this season.
Whatever works. So what are some things that you've learned so far this season that you either kind of thought you knew or you completely did not know going in?
Ooh, that's a tough one. Thinking about some things that I did not know. I don't know, from a player stance or a coaching stance. What are we talking here?
Anything.
I'm trying to think of what it is. Something that I didn't know coming in this season. Well, I mean, just this season, like I said, it's more unique of a season because we don't have really kind of, these guys just carrying, your leagues right now. You don't have basically Christian McCaffrey. The running back position's been completely banged up at the top. Even the running backs that have not been injured, when you think of Ezekiel Elliott or Alvin Kamara or Aaron Jones, even those guys have had pretty cattywampus production that's been up and down. So really kind of I guess what we learned is there is no kind of tried and true, foolproof kind of strategy for fantasy football in a given season. Every season is a snowflake. Things turn on a dime in this season, especially where you might be hot for a month, cold for a month, get back hot, just kind of ride this ebb and flow of the season, try to get on the right wave and being in the right pockets of production to
Rich, you there?
He had a smash on DJ Moore, but also Sam Darnold's play wasn't particularly strong, and it's done nothing but continue to trend downwards. And DJ Moore's gone with him. Terry McLaurin's the same way. A guy that got hurt is going to deal with unstable quarterback play. So if you can just see some initial trends and get out on some guys early, or be on some guys that get production that's rising, like Pat Freiermuth started to have an extended role a couple weeks ago, and then Eric Ebron got hurt and it just got, kickstarted and elevated. So just little things like that to kind of pay attention to dial in on, this season. And we got to stay on our toes this year. Because like I said, if you don't have Cooper Kupp, you're dealing with, a lot of high variance week to week.
Yes. For me, it was that just because the player is cheaper does not mean it's the better value play. You looked at it a couple of years ago with Michael Gallup versus Amari Cooper. Cooper was easily the better fantasy player in 2020 than Gallup was. Yet a lot of people were on Gallup just because he was the hot, cheaper option. This year, DK Metcalf versus Tyler Lockett. A lot of people are on Lockett just because he's the cheaper option. He has, outside of 2 or 3 games, he has not produced extremely well.
Yep. Yeah, that's a great one. I mean, the more expensive guy is typically more expensive for a reason. It's easy to look past that sometimes.
Yeah. Value-based drafting is important, but you also have to realize the value may not always be in the cheap. $100,000 Corvette is still a much better deal than a $30,000 Honda Civic.
Listen, you're getting your license here soon, right? You have a car lined up already?
Not yet. I have enough money from a summer job, and I'm getting my license in a little under a week. So, yeah. Might get Dad's old car too. So
nice. There's nothing wrong with that.
Yeah, especially if it's a nice Volvo. So one of the main storylines going into this year was how the rookie quarterbacks would play. The 5 main rookie quarterbacks would pan out with Trevor Lawrence, Zach Wilson, Justin Fields, Trey Lance, and Mac Jones. And a lot of people have varying opinions on how each have looked. Rich, what are yours?
Yeah, I mean, it's been a struggle. I think we were spoiled a little bit by Justin Herbert last year. You know, those types of seasons don't happen as often as, you know, we tend to think they do. A lot of times these guys do take a while to get acclimated to the NFL and get their feet wet. And that's kind of what we had happened with pretty much all of these guys. I mean, especially, you know, from a fantasy stance, I mean, none of these guys are really, you know, viable, you know, fantasy options right now. Justin Fields is starting to come along here the last couple of weeks with a couple of top 12 scoring weeks, but pretty much in just about all the metrics. I mean, these guys are all, you know, taking their time to get acclimated to the league. Mac Jones has probably had the most like harnessing from environment, you know, nurturement, you know, in the right system, kind of knowing to get rid of the football out of his hands, not necessarily just on a bad team either. So it's helped him out a little bit. But he's been largely more or less like a caretaker in the offense, trying not to make mistakes. So he's been probably the best in terms of just you know, on-field performance. It's been steady, but also has been easily in the best environment out of those guys. We've seen Trevor Lawrence kind of be up and down. You know, it's been disappointing him coming out of the bye. We would have liked to see him come out of the bye and play a little bit better than he has these past two games. But again, you know, he was, you know, drafted to a team that won one football game last year. It was going to be a struggle. You know, these guys don't typically land in good spots. Like I said, Fields is starting to show some signs of life here. Zach Wilson, we see the night and day change, right? When Zach Wilson's out of lineup, what does Jets offense looks like? Not only from now Mike White for his sample, but also Josh Johnson when he take what the defense is giving you, easy throws. Zach Wilson wasn't doing those things. You know, he was doing a lot of pressing, holding the ball too long, trying to push the football downfield. And then like Trey Lance, we're just still waiting on his opportunity, which could come sooner or later. You know, if the 49ers fall to 3-6, like, you know, they're favored to happen or unfavored, you know, they're underdogs against the Rams. We could see him sooner or later here if they fall out of it. But all in all, I mean, it's kind of what you expect from a rookie quarterback. These guys are going to struggle, take their lumps, and you just look for kind of continued improvement along the road. And at least, you know, Justin Fields has provided an inkling of hope the past 2 weeks.
Yes. Well, you mentioned Mac Jones' environment. He's the only one with a decent defense, as the Bears' defense is not what it's been in recent years. The 49ers' defense is too injured to be what it's been in recent years. The Jaguars and Jets defense doesn't really need to be mentioned whatsoever. But another interesting thing is none of them really have a good, solid number one receiver except for Fields, who has Allen Robinson, but he doesn't throw to him, or Trey Lance, who hasn't seen the field to get enough chemistry with Deebo Samuel.
I mean, it's a big deal with these guys, you know, having kind of those anchor guys to target. I mean, Fields, it's interesting because, you know, when you think about Fields from Ohio State perspective, I mean, he never threw to guys that recovered. And, you know, Allen Robb, that's why you've seen him have more success throwing to Darnell Mooney, a guy who could separate. You know, Fields is a guy that wants to see the throw and then let it rip. You know, and Allen Robinson's a guy, you know, his whole career he's been more of a contested catch guy. He's not a huge separator. He never really has been. So that's why I think you've seen a little bit of the struggle there. This happens with young quarterbacks. Devontae Parker was like this early in his career with Ryan Tannehill, and it took him getting, you know, a guy like Ryan Fitzpatrick, who was willing to throw, you know, to cover players, you know, 50-50 balls to kind of have his career accelerate. So yeah, but all these guys don't really have like a true alpha guy. I mean, you know, the Jets tried to invest in Corey Davis, who's more of like a two guy, a wide receiver two. Marvin Jones is literally, you know, a solid play. He's a really solid player, but a guy, you know, over 30 years old, again, not a huge separator, not really going to win, you know, running away from people. The 49ers have weapons. We just haven't seen Lance play yet. And then, you know, Mac is throwing to Nelson Aguilar and tight ends, and, you know, Jacoby Meyer, his best receiver is a slot player that, you know, it doesn't win downfield either. So yeah, all these guys don't really have the weaponry. Like I said, we were a little spoiled with what Justin Herbert gave us last year.
Yeah. The smart part of me wants to say, well, at least most of them will have high draft picks to get a receiver, but I know that's not going to happen.
It's a tough class. We'll just see what shakes out. It's not a tremendous wide receiver class coming up.
I will say, I do think the wide receiver class is like a bunch of 1B, 1C options that would, for people who would have been considered that in this past year's draft class, but they're being all grouped in that one tier, like mid to late first rounders of a normal year.
Yeah, I think that's what we're going to see, happen, I don't, with Treylon Burks and, Olave when we get there and those guys. But it'll be an interesting year because it's not a strong skill player class. I don't know anything about, anything else outside of the skill players yet, but I know it's not a tremendous skill player draft.
Well, you never know. Matt Corral could turn into the next Joe Burrow.
Yeah, I like it. I like Matt Corral.
Well, he is playing for Ole Miss, where lots of great NFL talents come from, just as Brown and Metcalf that came out 3 years ago on the same team.
Yeah, Dawson Knox is on that team. He's starting to come alive in his third year.
Oh, yeah.
Elijah Moore was on that team. Amazing that team, they couldn't win in college, but they're filled with studs.
That's almost as good as those Alabama teams. But the difference is the Mississippi Ole Miss quarterback versus Tua. Yep. It's not much of a contest.
Yeah, they didn't have many guys thrown to them.
Yeah. So talking about quarterbacks, the difference in good versus bad quarterbacks. What's wrong with Kansas City? There used to be the offensive powerhouse in the league, the envy. Patrick Mahomes should be winning MVP awards like none other, but they haven't really been that good this year.
I mean, they were good the first 6 weeks. I mean, they were second in the NFL in EPA per play, and it's been a struggle these last 3 weeks. I mean, 26th in EPA per play the past 3 weeks. Really not really getting any kind of production on the ground whatsoever. They're trying to run the football against some of these lighter fronts, just really no success. I mean, Darrell Williams is now 5th from the bottom in rushing yards under expectation. So as bad as the Clyde Edwards-Helaire pick was at the time, and still, if it is in hindsight, getting him back potentially this week or the next can at least help them out a little bit in creating, a little bit of yardage earned to keep them ahead of the sticks a little bit. And then, they're starting to press a little bit. I mean, you see this, how teams have defended them the past year and a half. They, a lot of teams are really going to drop back and play coverage. No one's blitzing Patrick Mahomes. He's being blitzed at the lowest rate in the NFL. And, he wants to make plays downfield, but, just needs to stay a little more patient. And also teams are defending Travis Kelce a little differently than they were last year. You've seen them kind of throw DBs at him, really trying to mug him at the line of scrimmage a lot more. And he's not winning like he was last year in those situations. So everyone just kind of pressing a little bit. They got to get a little bit better offensive line play again, too. The past 3 weeks, Patrick Mahomes is 9 of 32 passing under pressure, 2.9 yards per attempt. Over the first 6 weeks, he was averaging 8.6 yards per attempt under pressure. So pressure has been a problem. Probably will be a problem again on Sunday night because the Raiders, they don't blitz, but they are 5th in the NFL in pressure rate, and that without blitzing, Yannick Ngakoue has really kind of been the player he was, earlier in his career, and Max Crosby has been excellent as well. So that's a great kind of a matchup to watch on Sunday night. It's interesting too because the Raiders don't really play a lot of the defenses that have given the Chiefs trouble, which is a lot of the 2 high safety looks. The Raiders are actually number 1 in the NFL in 1 high safety looks defensively. They're one of the few teams that really just live in cover 3. So it'll be interesting to see if it opens up maybe a couple of these shot plays that they've missed a few weeks, and Tyreek can land one because it's probably not going to be any of the other guys. And that's the other problem too, is they're not really getting contributions from any of their depth. It would have been a nice spot for maybe Odell to go and contribute. But, McCole Hardman really has never found his niche as a receiver. Josh Gordon, we've seen that's led nowhere so far. And then you've got Demarcus Robinson and Byron Pringle, who are just kind of guys out there. So a little bit of everything kind of pulled together. I still believe in Andy Reid, and I still believe in Patrick Mahomes, the talent for them to kind of pull this together and try to right the ship here over the back end of the season. They still have 5 division games left. So, I mean, it's in their hands right now.
For me, the problems were because I'm from Oklahoma, so we used OU games are going on at our house. Patrick Mahomes would have the same problem as Spencer Rattler, where teams were letting him throw. He would get overconfident and try to thread the needle into places where normally he could, but teams know he's going to try to thread the needle and make the hole smaller, and eventually turnovers will accumulate, which has been what's happening with Patrick Mahomes. Correct?
Yeah. And he's definitely just been not patient enough. And we've seen it with Josh Allen last week too, with the Jaguars approach to them. These guys have lived on making plays downfield, and Patrick Mahomes, especially his whole career, has really never run into a roadblock yet from making plays downfield. And, just a little impatience. You see the throw against the Ravens that basically cost them the game. And then he had another one a couple weeks ago against the Washington football team where, he drops the snap and you just don't have to do that much, just a little bit of pressing, a little bit more patience, try to, rein it in. A couple of them haven't been his fault too, drop balls and tip balls, but he's definitely made a few where just like I said, you want to stay a little patient, take what the defense is giving you. And these guys come out of their shoes a little bit. And we've seen that with Patrick Mahomes and even Josh Allen a little bit.
So you mentioned the Bills Jaguars. What were the causes for a bunch of upsets last week? My Broncos came up over the Cowboys.
There you go.
Derrick Henry-less Titans beat the Rams, who many consider to be the best team in the league. What were some of the causes for that?
I think really easily, if you look at all three of those games, in the easiest way to line it up and tell you what went wrong for all those teams is all three of those defenses put pressure on quarterbacks without blitzing. And that's always going to be a problem for quarterbacks from now. It was a problem 50 years ago for quarterbacks. It's going to be a problem probably 50 years from now. If you can get pressure on the quarterback with just sending 4 players, it's going to throw off the rhythm. And what's interesting about the Broncos is previously, everyone that the Cowboys had played was blitz heavy against Dak Prescott. He was coming into last week. He was the most blitz quarterback in the NFL outside of Justin Fields. And the Broncos did not blitz him at all, but they consistently got pressure on him with 4. The Jaguars did the same thing. The Jaguars were destroying the Bills offensive line, and they're just dropping back and playing coverage. And when you're dropping back and playing coverage with 7 and 8 defenders in coverage, and you're able to get home with 3 and 4 defenders, that's a huge problem. Because there's no holes in the defense, like you said, and then you're going to get guys trying to make mistakes. And that happened to Matthew Stafford on Sunday night. I mean, Jeffrey Simmons was absolutely mashing on Sunday night. And it's the same thing that happened in all 3 of those games. All of those defensive fronts absolutely destroyed and threw those quarterbacks off rhythm. And it's not just get mistakes. It shakes you for the whole game. I mean, you think of Dak Prescott, he had throws in that game. Dak Prescott had guys open against the Broncos, but his rhythm was shaken off immediately and wasn't able to get comfortable. And then the inaccuracy starts to follow in those situations. So, I mean, there's a number of ways where teams approach defending those guys, but when you get home with 4, it's always going to be a problem, and you're always going to be able to kind of disrupt even the best passers.
Yes, you mentioned the Dak Prescott missed throws. I could think of at least 2 would-be touchdown passes to CeeDee Lamb that he sailed over CeeDee Lamb's head, including one on 4th down. So
I mean, if you're able to just get it, he was off rhythm right away.
You mentioned the Jaguars. Could the Jaguars be a recipe for success? Just try to win slugfests?
Yeah, I mean, I don't know I think what happened with the Jaguars, though, I don't know if they will repeat that against a lot of teams, because the Bills right now just cannot run the football. In the past 3 of the past 4 games, Josh Allen has been their leading rusher. And, you look at the past month, Bills running backs have 54 carries for 182 yards, 3.4 yards per carry. They're just not able to run the football. So what teams are saying is, and they're not even trying to run the football. They're the pass heaviest team on first down. And teams know this. So they're saying they're kind of daring them to try to run the football. And the Jaguars did that, and the Bills still could do absolutely nothing, even when they tried to run the football, and they just abandoned it early because they were getting nothing. So against somebody like the Jaguars play the Colts this week, they're going to have to defend the run. They're going to have to defend the run against the Colts, Jonathan Taylor. So we'll see, if they're able to kind of pull it out, because they still have major problems personnel-wise defensively. They don't really have a lot of talent there. But when you know what the opposition is going to do, and they're going to drop back and just throw, and you're able to get pressure with 4 and drop 8 guys in coverage, you're going to have some success when the offense is one-dimensional. So we'll see if they can make this a run. But the week before, we saw Geno Smith carve up the Jaguars. So I'm not ready to kind of go down the road that they're turning the corner yet.
So I'm saying this completely joking. Does that mean Geno Smith is better than Josh Allen?
Transitive property dictates so.
Transitive property also says the Jets are better than the Titans, who just beat the Rams, but that's a whole different story. So who are your leaders in the MVP race and the Super Bowl race right now?
Tom Brady would be my favorite for MVP. He had his bye week, still leads the NFL in touchdown passes. So he would be my front runner. And then I think that the guys in the running, I was never really kind of sold on Josh Allen being a true MVP. I think the the guys that are in the running, Matthew Stafford, even still barring what happened, last night, because he's also going to carry cachet. Like the Rams go 13-3 or 14-2, and he's going to have the narrative, right? Like people love to vote for the story. And so like he'll be in there with how he's played. And then I think Lamar Jackson as well. And I think we'll see this kind of play out over the second half of the season. But what Lamar Jackson has had to deal with this season, with the Ravens having the most players on injured reserve, his starting left tackle, one of the best left tackles in the league, is out again. He's been he's dealing with pressure like crazy. He's been sacked at the highest rate since his rookie season. They can't run the football with their running backs really effectively like they have in the past. And he's been forced to be more of a passer this season, and he's been excellent. He's been excellent as a passer this season. 8.3 yards per pass attempt. He's not really turning the ball over. So, I mean, I think that if he can keep this up, he'll definitely start to earn, more votes and people in his corner as it goes on. But right now, the GOAT is number one still. I mean, Brady's the front runner for me. And I would say that they're still the front runner for the Super Bowl favorite for me as well. I know it's chalky because they just won it, but there's really not a lot of holes in that roster. And if they can just continue to get healthy as the season goes on, because I don't think anyone in the NFC South is really going to challenge them. I know they lost the Saints, and the Saints have been kind of a dagger, in Brady's like kind of side, but we've seen them, if they're not going to have Alvin Kamara and they're still dealing with this quarterback issue, I think that they're still play a little bit above their station so far this season.
Oh, yes. I still think that the Rams showed how to beat the Buccaneers in that one game. And I do like the Cardinals as well in the NFC, just because it's hard to argue with Kyler Murray, who's also looked like an MVP type candidate.
NFC playoffs are going to be an absolute joy. They're going to be an absolute blast.
NFC divisional round and after are going to be a joy for me, just because the wild cards outside of the one or two NFC West teams, it's just going to be ugly.
Yeah, the teams they're going to back in are not going to be fun that first weekend. But once we get the real people throwing blows, it's going to be those real teams. I mean, because Packers, Cardinals, Rams, Cowboys, Bucks, then we're really going to be looking at some fun games.
Yes. But who do you have in the AFC then?
The AFC is wide open because I know the Titans have the best record, but this is a team I still have questions about the Titans. They're getting there still, and they beat all these good teams. They deserve to be anyone that's backing them for sure. I still don't know if they have the defense that I believe in. If they get home with 4 like they did on Sunday, they could definitely wreck a lot of people. And if Derrick Henry comes back in the playoffs back to full strength, I mean, anyone could win that way. But it's hard to win with their style of football to win like 4 games in a row against really elite teams in the postseason. So there's some fragility there. We'd like to see Ryan Tannehill play a little bit better than he has so far this season. I mean, it's wide open. I like the Chargers a little bit, but I mean, the defense is so bad. It's really hard for me to get behind them. I like the Ravens, but they are a team that they've had so many injuries, and you've seen them be up and down as well. It's really wide open. The Bills defense is playing excellent. If they can somehow figure out a little offensive balance and just not have things like that happened last week where they can be like, have the pass taken away from them. I think that their team is set up well because the defense is playing out of its mind right now. So, I mean, I guess I would lean the Bills by default just because I think they have the most kind of complete offensive defensive balance. But the AFC is wide open.
Yeah, I think we can both agree that the Super Bowl winner will come from the NFC side.
I mean, maybe we always think that stuff, but then you look at you never know what can happen. I would favor the NFC for sure.
Oh yes.
But any of these teams that can get in, because the AFC teams that can get in, they at least have elite quarterbacks, and if you get your elite quarterback, one of the elite quarterback teams get to the dance, then anything can happen.
Oh yes, except if you're the Browns, who can it's just running the ball.
And that's what scares me about like this of the Titans big picture. Is Ryan Tannehill going to be a guy that's going to reel off 4 strong games? Is he going to? And Baker Mayfield's the same way. But I do think Josh Allen is capable of doing that. I do think Lamar Jackson's capable of doing it. We know Patrick Mahomes is capable of doing it. And I think Justin Herbert is right on the cusp of being able to do that. So those are the teams that stand out the most.
Yes. But you did not mention Jonathan Taylor. And I'm always a backer for a non-quarterback to win the MVP award just because it rarely happens. And I was all in on Henry, going to try to win it. Just with 219 attempts through however many games. And I know Taylor's not going to win it, but has he surprised you at all this season?
No, I mean, this is the guy that I thought that we were getting, coming out of college, basically a running back. If you were to make a running back in the lab, like it would probably look like Jonathan Taylor, a guy that's 230 pounds, can run a sub 4.5 40. Just you look at his resume, even going back to college. I mean, 2,000 yards literally every season in Power 5 conference. And he's basically been that player. It just took the Colts to kind of extend his workload a little bit. And, he did deal with an injury early in the season, a knee injury, and maybe that kind of played a role into it. But now that they've kind of leaned in and his snaps have extended, he's running more pass routes too. We're starting to see the takeoff for him. Yeah, he's not going to. Henry, actually, if he would have kept it up the whole season, he would have had a shot. I think he would have got votes for sure.
Yes. But for John, I agree with you. I know I'm not a dynasty ranker or draft expert or anything like that, but Jonathan Taylor was my number one running back coming out of college, and J.K. Dobbins was my number two, just because those guys I know can run and catch passes well. Swift has surprised me completely because I didn't think he had their best vision, but he's still looking really good as well.
I mean, he's been great out of the backfield, but we have seen, like you said, like the rushing production has been kind of a thorn in his side, and that's why they keep playing Jamal Williams and neutral game script, because DeAndre Swift is actually right now he's last in rushing yards below expectation, and so I mean that's been kind of still a little bit of a thorn. But for fantasy, he's catching so many passes and receptions carry so much weight. He's been getting there on those.
Yes. I believe it was a stat by Graham Barfield that said one catch is worth 1.65 carries in terms of fantasy points. And that is why like Eckler does so well. Henry even got 18, 19 passes, and that's why he was doing really well. Just something to keep in mind. So
yeah, they're a little bit of a cheat code in a way. You got to get those dual threat guys.
Yes. So two of those that was running backs in that class, the 2020 class, Akers and Dobbins, both suffered season-ending injuries before the season. You're a dynasty player. Which one would you rather have as of right now?
Oh, still Dobbins for me. I mean, I had Dobbins ahead of Akers, and I don't think there's really anything that changed. I think he's in a perfect scheme for him too. It's essentially everything he did in college. He's right in that scheme. He's probably not going to catch a ton of passes in the Ravens offense for the early part of his career, but I still love the fit and I love the talent. And the ACL injury also is shown to be one that guys bounce back from more than the Achilles. Although Akers we're starting to see, like, could he possibly come back in the playoffs? He's been tweeting in videos of himself working out and kind of hinting like he could potentially play in the postseason. But I'm still a Dobbins guy over Akers.
Yes. And Darrell Henderson certainly complicates matters with his emergence after him basically being dormant for the past 2 or 3 years. So the big news that broke today, we're filming this on Thursday, was OBJ signing with the Rams. What's your take on that?
Yeah, I love it from his angle because, well, one, you have to remember too that like he's hurt. It wasn't really kind of discussed a lot through the process. He's got a torn labrum and a sprained AC joint in his shoulder that's going to require surgery in the offseason. So, I mean, I think that he definitely probably didn't have the monetary offers that maybe he was looking for because of that reason. And we're also in the middle of the season. A lot of teams just don't have a lot of loose cap, especially the good teams don't have a lot of loose cap right now. So that he was going to always have to, I think, go to be a complementary piece somewhere because of the injury. For him, it was the best thing. So, I mean, he could have went to Green Bay and played alongside Devontae Adams, but, listen, it's cold. If you're going to ask me if I want to play in Los Angeles or Green Bay, I would probably choose Los Angeles too. And then it came out, they talked about, him and Sean McVay, had a conversation, and Sean McVay, basically explaining how he could use him and use him to the best capabilities. Since Johnny Munt got hurt a couple weeks ago, the Rams have just been a base 11 personnel team. They've lived in 11 personnel. 91% of their offensive snaps have been in 11 personnel since Johnny Munt got hurt. It's the highest rate in the NFL. So it does stunt Van Jefferson. We'll probably won't see Van Jefferson really kind of get his takeoff that we kind of all were hoping for, and it looked like we were going to get. But Odell can come in and play alongside an offense that's already established, a great quarterback with a coordinator that knows how to, design, plays for everybody to maximize their ability. It reminds me a lot of when the Bucs added Antonio Brown last year, in the midway point. Antonio Brown gets to come play with this elite offense. Everyone's kind of worried. Is there enough targets to go around? We don't really need to worry about that because the offense and the quarterback play is so good that these guys are going to find ways to get there. So I look at it very similarly to what the Bucs did last year with Antonio Brown.
Yes. If I was Sean McVay, though, I would prefer running four wide receiver sets with Van Jefferson just because I don't trust Higbee whatsoever. That's totally not biased at all. But do you see OBJ cutting into Cooper Kupp's workload a little bit just from the sheer volume standpoint of Kupp?
Yeah, I think it's from an overall target perspective, there's going to be, give from everybody. And, maybe it was always unrealistic just to expect Cooper Kupp to go wire to wire with, 35% of the team targets. It was probably always going to be a little lofty. I mean, he already has 103 targets on the season, but he's going to be but also adding Odell Beckham on the field helps Cooper Kupp. He's just the middle of the field is just going to be wide open still. So I expect Cooper Kupp to still be, a pretty dominant force in this offense. It lowers the floor for a little bit of all these guys. But like I said, like the Bucs situation, there might be some volatility week to week in terms of targets, but the offense and the system are so good that when the dust settles, I mean, all these guys are going to have production when it comes down to it.
Yes. Does Beckham still have it though? Still have his burst that we saw with him when he was with the Giants. Still could take that 5-yard slant, 65 yards to the house. Can he still do that?
We haven't seen that element, like the yak Odell. Like we haven't really seen that in a while. But from my novice eye and like the work that Matt Harmon does, charting wide receivers, I mean, he still scores really well in like reception perception that Matt does, and I definitely value Matt's work and his opinion. He's still getting open. And so, I mean, I just think it was a bad fit all around. I mean, you had a guy that, maybe freelances and not doesn't run as rigid routes as maybe that the system wanted him to run, and where he wins, maybe not were suited to where Baker Mayfield wins. Think the deep throws outside the numbers or on those, like, those in breakers, like that's not really Baker Mayfield's game either. So, it just really didn't fit. So we'll see how, he performs here in a different offensive system and different quarterback. But I still believe that, Odell Beckham was a guy that was still getting open and creating separation. We know the hands can still be there too. So I'm looking forward to see this next chapter of his career because I would love to see him at least get back to being a really, good fantasy player. The one thing, like I said, that's scary. So he's playing hurt the rest of the season. Like that still has to be a factor for a lot of people. And he already is going. It's already been stated he's going to have off-season shoulder surgery. So always keep that in mind too. That the ceiling might still be a little lower while he's still playing injured.
Yes. Part of me wants to bring up Tom Brady going halfway through last year with a torn MCL, but that'll be fine. So, final question for you: what's your favorite metric for predicting fantasy success?
I mean, it varies. Like I wish there was just one thing, but we always want to start with opportunity first. And when we talk about opportunity, it could be varying, not just raw targets, but percentage of team targets. Where are they getting targeted? Who's getting a high share of team air yards? So what is their depth of target? Those types of things for like pass catchers. Volume for running backs is always going to be tried and true. And then when you go like under the hood and like we get into like the advanced metrics and stuff like that, I mean, like I said, I've mentioned like, rushing yards over expectation and under expectation a lot. That shows you like guys that can create on their own, as well as what's getting created for them on the running back position. And, basically like when we're getting into the weeds, like the matchups, what kind of defenses is an opponent facing? What do these offenses do on a typical basis? So they want to get the ball to their best football players all the time. So does the line for defensive weakness? We've seen like this, like last week, Keenan Allen and the Chargers tight ends smash. They play the Eagles, who play a ton of, too high coverage under Jonathan Gannon. They don't give up a lot of big plays. And you see like a guy like Mike Williams have 2 for 58, but then you see Keenan Allen have 12 catches. All the tight ends get involved near the end zone. They had 2 tight end touchdowns and a 2-point conversion. So things like that are what we kind of look for when we get into the matchups. But always start with opportunity first, and then we can get underlying into efficiency and then matchups after that. But you always want to start with the player and his opportunity first.
Yes. Well, Rich, I thank you for coming on. Where can we find any of your work?
Yeah, you can find everything I do at Sharp Football Analysis. I'm on Twitter at Lord Reeves. I always love coming on this show with you. I'm glad we got to do it. We got to fly solo. I also want to wish you a happy early birthday. I know your birthday is coming up. So we're going to need you to pass that driver's test so you can put the heat on your dad, give him some stuff to worry about, with you hitting the roads.
Oh, he's already worried enough about it. Thank you. Bye.
All right.